My son once told me I was his hero, but last week he tried to kill me. I had just sold my company for $57 million, ready to retire and finally enjoy life. Over dinner, while music played and laughter filled the restaurant, I lifted my glass of orange juice, unaware my son had slipped poison inside. He thought I wouldn't notice. He thought he'd inherit millions by sunrise. But what he didn't know was that I had already prepared a move that would destroy him forever. Before we dive into this unbelievable story of betrayal and survival, I want to know, where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments. I love seeing how far these stories travel around the world. And if you enjoy true stories of revenge, betrayal, and justice, make sure to hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the bell so you never miss a new upload. Also, don't forget to share this video with a friend. You never know who might need to hear a story like this. The papers sat neatly on the mahogany coffee table, glowing faintly in the evening light that spilled through the floor-to-ceiling windows of my Manhattan penthouse. After 42 years of sweat, sacrifice, and sleepless nights, my signature on those contracts meant one thing. The empire I had built from nothing was no longer mine. The ink was barely dry, yet the silence in the apartment felt heavier than any boardroom I had ever stepped into. I leaned back in my leather chair, scotch in hand, and stared at the skyline that had witnessed my rise. The company was gone. The responsibility was gone. And in its place was $57 million wired neatly into my accounts. For a man like me, money had never been the real prize. It was time, freedom, the ability to breathe without watching a clock. My late wife, Catherine, used to beg me to slow down, to spend more birthdays at home, more anniversaries on beaches instead of airplanes. I had always promised her next year. Now there were no more next years with her. Only regrets. I swirled the amber liquid in my glass, the ice clinking like distant church bells. I had missed so many small joys. Christmas mornings, school plays, family dinners, trading them for expansion plans, client meetings, and corporate battles. I thought I was doing it for my son, Daniel. To give him the kind of life I never had. To ensure he never had to work for pennies the way I once did. But now, as I sat alone in a penthouse worth more than most people's lifetime earnings, I wondered if any of it had been worth the cost. A buzz on my phone broke the spell. A text from Daniel. Reservation confirmed. Bellinat Terrace. 8 p.m. champagne service arranged. Congratulations, Dad. A smile tugged at my lips. For all the distance that had grown between us, he still knew how to make things feel special. Maybe tonight would be different. Maybe tonight, instead of tension about business, we'd finally sit as family. Just a father, a son, and his wife. I slipped on my navy suit, the one Catherine always said made me look like I belonged on the cover of Fortune magazine, and reached for a watch ID never worn. A Patek Philippe. I had bought it the year we hit our first million. A celebration that had been postponed so many times it gathered dust in my collection. Tonight, I decided, it deserved its debut. The city outside my window glowed like a promise. Central Park shimmered with early evening lights. Couples strolled hand in hand, children laughed on playgrounds, and joggers carved their paths beneath treetops that had stood longer than my empire. It was a world I had always watched from glass towers, never touched. Tonight, I would walk through it. Tonight, I would join it. At 7:15 sharp, I locked the door behind me and stepped into the crisp September air. The park smelled of damp leaves and possibility. For once, I didn't feel like the man who always arrived late, distracted by quarterly earnings. I felt lighter, free. As I crossed the park, memories flooded me. Catherine with her scarf flying in the wind, laughing as Daniel raced ahead on his first bicycle. The three of us had once been inseparable. Until business, my business became the fourth member of the family, and slowly pushed the others away. But tonight could be the start of something new. Daniel and his wife, Alina, had agreed to dinner to celebrate the sale. Perhaps without the looming shadow of inheritance and responsibility, we might find common ground again. The golden glow of Bellinat appeared through the trees. Its terrace lights twinkling like stars draped over wrought-iron railings. I spotted them immediately. Daniel in a tailored black suit, Alina in an emerald dress that caught every flicker of lantern light. Dad, his hug was firm, warmer than I expected, almost desperate. Alina kissed me on both cheeks, her smile polished, perfect, rehearsed. You look wonderful, she said smoothly. Retirement suits you already. The hostess led us through the bustling dining room and out to the terrace. Manhattan stretched below us, a constellation of ambition and failure. The table was dressed in white linen, crystal glasses, and candlelight. Everything felt orchestrated, cinematic, like a scene from the kind of life I had always chased. We clinked glasses under the soft glow of string lights. Daniel's toast was simple, direct. To you, Dad, you deserve happiness. His tone carried an edge I couldn't quite name. For a moment, I let myself believe this was real, that tonight was about family, not fortune. Alina ordered for the table, her confidence smooth as silk. Lobster risotto, Caesar salads, wine that cost more than most people's rent. I didn't protest. Tonight wasn't about frugality. Tonight was about beginnings. As we waited for our meals, Alina leaned forward. Tell us about your plans, Irving. Where will you go first? Japan, I said, without hesitation. Cherry blossoms, temples, quiet gardens. Catherine always dreamed of Kyoto. The thought warmed me. I could almost see her there, camera in hand, chasing light through the branches. Daniel fidgeted with his napkin, glancing at his watch every few minutes. I chalked it up to nerves. Retirement was as much his transition as mine. He had grown up in the shadow of the company. After all, the music drifted across the terrace, a jazz quartet filling the air with smoke and nostalgia. Elena placed her hand on Daniel's and whispered, "Dance with me." He hesitated, then looked to me. "Go," I said. "It's been ages since I've seen you to dance." They moved together across the small dance floor, elegant in the candlelight. For the first time in years, I felt at peace. Watching them, sipping my wine, imagining a future where family mattered more than balance sheets. And then, just as the music swelled, I noticed him, a man in a dark suit standing near the terrace railing. His eyes scanned the room with professional sharpness. Security, I thought. Expensive places like this always hired protection. I lifted my glass of orange juice. I had switched from scotch to something lighter, and felt a strange unease I couldn't name. The city sparkled, the music swayed, and for the first time in my life, I wondered if my freedom might cost me more than I imagined. The lobster risotto arrived, steaming and fragrant, its golden surface glistening beneath the candlelight. Alina beamed as the waiter set it down. "This is their specialty, Irving. You'll love it." I smiled politely, though I'd never been a fan of lobster. Catherine used to tease me for preferring simple dishes when everyone else ordered extravagance. Still, I didn't want to spoil the evening. I picked up my fork, twirling the rice, pretending to savor the aroma. Daniel raised his glass of red wine again. "To a new chapter," he said. His eyes flickered, sharp and unreadable. I lifted my orange juice. To family, the words felt good, almost healing. For a fleeting moment, I believed we might repair what years of neglect and resentment had corroded. I took a bite of the risotto. The flavors exploded, rich, buttery, decadent, yet beneath the creaminess was something faint, bitter. I frowned, chewing slowly. My tongue prickled as if I'd bitten into a sliver of metal. Alina leaned forward, watching. "Do you like it?" Her tone was too eager, her gaze too intense. I forced a smile. "Delicious," I lied. But the unease in my chest deepened. My stomach clenched. My throat burned faintly. I coughed, reaching for my orange juice to wash it down. The citrus cooled the bitterness, but only slightly. "Dad, are you okay?" Daniel asked, voice carefully measured. "I'm fine," I said, waving it off. "Just swallowed wrong." Still, the prickle on my tongue refused to fade. I pushed the plate away. "I think I'll skip the rest." Elena's smile tightened. "But it's their signature dish. I've had enough. Thank you." Silence stretched. Daniel sipped his wine, his eyes darting to Elena's. A message passed between them, unspoken but sharp. The band shifted into a slow tune. Other couples drifted to the dance floor. Alina touched Daniel's arm again. "Dance with me." This time he rose quickly. They moved with practiced grace, bodies close, whispers masked by music. I watched them, a pit forming in my stomach. Something was wrong, something I couldn't quite name. I glanced around the terrace, searching for distraction. That man in the dark suit still lingered near the railing, scanning the crowd. He wasn't staff, I realized. His posture was military, precise. My instincts from years in business, instincts that had saved me from more than one hostile takeover, flared alive. I waved the waiter over. "Could I have another orange juice?" "Fresh, please." He nodded and left. As I waited, I shifted the risotto plate slightly. The sauce clung to the porcelain, unusually thick, cloying. A memory tugged at me, an old colleague in pharmaceuticals once telling me that certain poisons left a metallic aftertaste, a burning in the throat. The thought chilled me. No, I told myself, it was absurd. My son wouldn't, Elena wouldn't. The waiter returned with my drink. I sipped slowly, eyes drifting back to Daniel and Elena. They weren't smiling. Their movements were stiff, their whispers urgent. And then I saw it. Elena's hand pressed against Daniel's chest, her lips curling into a sharp hiss. He shook his head, jaw tight. She gripped his arm harder, nails digging in. Whatever conversation they were having, it wasn't romantic. It was desperate. I set down my glass, heart pounding. The metallic taste lingered. Stubborn, the burning in my throat sharpened. I reached for my phone under the table, sliding it open discreetly. My lawyer, Jacob, was on speed dial. So was Dr. Harris, my physician. Years of cautious living had made me paranoid enough to keep emergency contacts close. Tonight, that paranoia felt like prophecy. The band ended their song. Daniel and Elena returned, faces smoothed into masks. Elena's eyes darted to my nearly untouched plate. "Not hungry." "Too rich for me," I said evenly. Daniel's smile was strained. "You always were picky, Dad." We fell into small talk, the kind that felt more like interrogation than conversation. Where would I travel first? How would I manage my investments? Who had access to my accounts? Questions that, under any other circumstances, might have seemed harmless. But paired with the bitterness on my tongue, the burning in my chest, and the military man watching from the railing, they felt like barbed wires tightening around me. I excused myself to the restroom. Inside the dim marble chamber, I locked the door and braced against the sink. My reflection looked back at me. Older, yes, but sharper than ever. My instincts screamed now. This wasn't paranoia. This was survival. I rinsed my mouth with water, spitting until the metallic taste faded slightly. My hands shook. Someone knocked softly on the door. Mr. Hale. The voice was low, steady. Male. Who is it? The man from the terrace. Step out, carefully. Don't eat or drink anything else. My breath caught. He knew. I unlocked the door slowly. The man in the suit stood there, expression hard. Name's Carter. Private security. Your lawyer hired me weeks ago. He had a feeling. I asked, stunned. Your son and daughter-in-law. Carter said flatly. They're not celebrating you tonight. They're trying to kill you. The words struck like thunder. I gripped the sink for balance. They laced your food. He continued. Small dose, enough to weaken you. Not enough to finish the job here. The plan was to make it look like a medical collapse. Natural then, Alina calls the ambulance. But it never arrives. My mind reeled. My son, my only son. The boy I raised with bedtime stories and bike rides. The man I sacrificed everything for. I clenched my jaw. Why? Carter's gaze didn't waver. 57 million reasons. The number rang in my head like a funeral bell. $57 million. The empire I had built. The future I had imagined for him. It had become the price of my life. The words 57 million reasons echoed in my mind like a death knell. Daniel, my only son, my flesh and blood. I had pictured many futures with him, succeeding me in the company. Carrying on the family name, raising grandchildren Catherine would have adored. But never, not once, had I imagined this. My boy raising a glass to me while slipping poison into my food. I steadied my breathing, forcing the trimmer from my hands. 42 years in business had taught me something critical. When ambushed, never show fear. I looked at Carter. His face was stone, eyes trained, posture alert. You're certain? I asked. He nodded once. I intercepted chatter weeks ago. Your lawyer was worried. He hired me to shadow you. Tonight, the moment I saw them switch your plate, I knew. My throat tightened. Switch my plate. Yes, Carter said. Your risotto wasn't the one you ordered. Alina insisted on plating it herself. The waiter confirmed. The betrayal sharpened into a blade, twisting in my gut. Catherine had loved Alina once, welcoming her like the daughter we never had. And Daniel, he had been my hope. My reason for pushing through every sleepless night. And now they wanted me dead. I forced a bitter laugh. Do they really think I'd leave them the money? They do, Carter said. Your will still names Daniel as your sole heir. I froze. My lawyer had urged me to update it after Catherine's passing, but I hadn't. Some part of me, the foolish, sentimental part, still believed Daniel would grow into the man I hoped for. I had left everything to him, everything, and now he and Alina had decided they couldn't wait. The fury burned cold, precise. Business had taught me how to dismantle rivals, how to crush opposition without lifting a fist. Tonight, those same lessons would apply. Only the opponent was my own son. I straightened my tie, smoothing the fabric like armor. Carter, can you prove this? Already working on it, he said. He tapped his ear discreetly. I'm wired. Audio recording everything since you walked in. Good evidence. The one weapon more powerful than money itself. Follow my lead, I said. We're not confronting them yet. Not here. When I stepped back onto the terrace, my mask was firmly in place. Calm, smiling. The image of a father enjoying dinner with his son. Daniel looked up sharply, scanning my face for weakness. Elena's smile was painted on, brittle. You took a while, she said lightly. Old age, I replied smoothly, sliding back into my chair. The body doesn't keep pace like it used to. Daniel chuckled, but it was hollow. He poured me another glass of orange juice, his hand steady, almost too steady. I let the glass sit untouched. The rest of dinner played out like a chess game. Alina filled the silence with stories about her charity work, her designer gowns, her trips to Milan. Daniel asked about my travel plans, circling back again and again to details of flights, hotels, insurance policies. Each question sharpened my certainty. They weren't celebrating me. They were studying logistics. When dessert arrived, tiramisu drenched in espresso. I excused myself again, claiming fatigue. Daniel looked almost relieved. Alina masked her disappointment poorly. Of course, Dad, Daniel said, standing. We'll walk you home. I waved it off. Stay, enjoy yourselves. I need the rest. He hesitated, then kissed my cheek. Love you, Dad. The words rang hollow, a curse disguised as affection. Back at the penthouse, the city's glittering lights felt colder than ever. Carter followed silently, his presence a shadow I now welcomed. Inside, I poured myself a glass of water and stared out at the skyline. They really would have done it, wouldn't they? Yes, Carter said simply. If you hadn't stopped eating, we'd be calling an ambulance right now. The thought sickened me. But the sickness was quickly consumed by fire. They thought I was old, weak, vulnerable. They thought decades of empire building had dulled my edge, but they were wrong. I turned to Carter. If they want war over $57 million, I'll give them war, but not the kind they expect. His brow arched slightly. What do you have in mind? I smiled grimly. Leverage, evidence, and patience. The first step came at dawn. I called Jacob, my lawyer. His voice cracked with relief when he heard me alive. Good God, Irving, I told you they'd try something. You were right, I said. Now we move forward. I want the will changed immediately. Daniel and Alina are to receive nothing, not a cent. Done. Jacob said. Who shall inherit then? I'll decide that later. For now, set up a trust. Quietly, make sure it can't be contested. Understood. Next came the bank. Access codes changed. Secondary signatories revoked. Alina had always pushed Daniel to be more involved in my finances. That door was now slammed shut. By noon, my empire was locked tighter than Fort Knox. Carter remained at my side, unobtrusive but watchful. They'll notice the shift, he warned. Let them, I said. Paranoia is a poison more potent than arsenic. I want them squirming. The following days unfolded like theater. Daniel called, his voice sugary, asking how I felt after dinner. Alina sent texts with heart emojis and pictures of luxury resorts we could visit together. I replied with warmth, affection, gratitude, never once hinting at suspicion, because the truth was, betrayal wasn't enough. Not for me, not after 42 years of sacrifice. No, I wanted more. I wanted them exposed, shamed, stripped of everything they thought was theirs. And when the time was right, I would deliver the final blow myself. As I lay in bed that night, staring at the ceiling, Catherine's face filled my mind. Her voice echoed softly. Don't let them take from you what we built. Don't let our sacrifices be wasted. I closed my eyes. For her, for me, and for every year stolen by their greed. I would make sure Daniel and Alina regretted ever touching that plate of risotto. For the first time in decades, I moved like a man with no obligations. But beneath that calm exterior, every step was calculated. My son thought he had inherited my fortune and my foolish trust. What he didn't realize was that he had also inherited my cunning, and that I had decades of practice in the art of war without a single bullet fired. By the end of the week, my lawyer, Jacob, had secured the trust. Daniel and Alina were legally locked out of my estate, though they wouldn't know it until the time came. I left the old will in the safe, exactly where they expected it. A decoy, waiting like a mousetrap. Carter had upgraded my penthouse with silent safeguards, hidden cameras, encrypted locks, motion sensors. If they try to push again, he said, we'll have proof that sticks. I nodded. Proof was power. But power alone wasn't enough. No, I wanted their downfall to be slow, corrosive. I wanted them to feel what it meant to live in fear of discovery. So I played the role of doting father. I invited them to brunch at the penthouse, where sunlight streamed through tall glass windows, and the aroma of freshly baked bread filled the air. Alina arrived in designer heels, Daniel in a navy suit, both wearing smiles, stretched to thin. Dad, you look good, Daniel said, kissing my cheek. His eyes flickered, searching me for weakness. Retirement suits me, I said lightly. Freedom tastes better than any boardroom victory. Alina laughed, a little too high-pitched. We're so happy for you, Irving, truly. I gestured to the table. Fresh fruit, smoked salmon, pastries, scrambled eggs, all untouched when they arrived. Their eyes darted subtly, scanning the plates. Alina even asked, you didn't cook this yourself, did you? Of course not, I said, chuckling. My housekeeper prepared everything. Relief washed over her face, but it was fleeting. She expected me to drop my guard. Instead, I spoke of travel. Kyoto, in the spring, Santorini in the summer. Their questions followed, circling like vultures. When will you fly? Which hotels? Do you carry medication? Will you be traveling alone? I answered smoothly, feeding them scraps of half-truths. All the while, Carter listened from his concealed position down the hall, recording every word. Halfway through brunch, I dropped my first stone into their calm surface. Alina, I said casually, buttering a slice of bread. The risotto the other night was unusual, bitter, almost metallic. Her hand froze mid-air, a strawberry slipping from her fork. Daniel's eyes widened briefly before he forced a laugh. Italian cuisine isn't really your style, Dad. You probably just weren't used to it. I smiled. Perhaps. I sipped my juice slowly. Funny though, my doctor said metallic aftertastes can sometimes indicate poisoning. The silence that followed was delicious. Elena's lips parted, her face pale beneath her makeup. That's terrible. Who would even think of such a thing? I leaned back in my chair, letting the pause linger. Indeed, neither touched another bite of food. After they left, Carter emerged from his corner, smirking. That rattled them. Good, I said. Fear will do half our work for us. The next stage of the trap came quietly. I asked Jacob to invite Daniel to a private meeting at the law office. A formality, Jacob explained. About updating documents post-sale. Daniel arrived eager, dressed sharply, Elena at his side. Jacob greeted them warmly, then presented a stack of papers filled with meaningless clauses and legal jargon. As Daniel flipped through, Carter's concealed recorder captured every word. So, Dad's finally locking things down, huh? Daniel said under his breath. Elena nudged him sharply, hissing, "Shut up." Their whispers would later become my arsenal. Afterward, I treated them to dinner, maintaining my role as the oblivious father. I watched them closely. Daniel laughed louder than usual. Elena clung to her wineglass, as though it could steady her nerves. They were unraveling, not from my accusations, but from the possibility that I knew. Weeks passed. I withdrew slowly from their lives, answering calls with polite excuses, delaying dinners with fabricated doctor appointments. Distance became its own poison, gnawing at them. When I did see them, I made sure to drop subtle reminders. A mention of my will, a reference to Catherine's old jewelry, a passing comment about how sudden deaths were rarely without investigation these days. Each time, Elena's hands would tighten, her smile falter. Daniel would sweat through his shirt, tugging at his collar. I was no longer their father. I was their executioner in disguise, holding the blade above their heads and letting them wonder when it might fall. The breaking point came one rainy Thursday evening. Daniel arrived at my penthouse unannounced, drenched and wet. "Dad," he said, his voice shaking, "we need to talk." I gestured calmly to the living room. "Of course, sit." He paced instead, running a hand through his wet hair. "You've been distant, suspicious. I just want to know if you think I would ever hurt you." I raised a brow. "Why would I think that?" His face crumpled with relief and terror all at once. Because you said things. About poison, about wills." I leaned forward, clasping my hands. "Daniel, if I truly believed my own son wanted me dead, well, that would break me." The words hung heavy, both comfort and accusation. His shoulders sagged, he sank into the armchair, head in his hands. "I'm sorry," he whispered. "I don't know what came over me, Elena." The sentence stopped there. His lips pressed tight, fear sealing the truth inside. I placed a hand on his shoulder. "Go home, son, rest. Tomorrow will be better." But inside, my fury solidified into steel. He had almost confessed. Almost the proof I needed was inches away. And soon, I would have it all. The night Daniel nearly confessed, I barely slept. His broken words echoed in my mind. Elena, but fear, had closed his mouth before the truth spilled out. I sat by the window, watching the city breathe beneath me, my glass of scotch untouched on the table. It was all so clear now. My son was not the boy who once begged me to teach him chess, who built model airplanes with me on the kitchen floor. That boy was long gone. What sat across from me now was a man hollowed out by greed, his soul filled with whispers from a woman who wanted my fortune more than she wanted his love. I couldn't rely on emotion anymore. Sentiment had nearly killed me. Now, I had to finish what I'd started. Jacob and I spent the following week crafting the perfect illusion. We prepared a revised will, one that looked legitimate enough to fool even Elena's sharp eyes. In it, I restored Daniel as heir. With Elena included as co-beneficiary, every clause was designed to appear airtight, but buried deep inside was a trapdoor, a legal flaw so obvious any court would dismiss it as fraudulent the moment it surfaced. This version I placed inside the penthouse safe, where Elena had always insisted I keep important papers. I even left the safe key in my desk drawer, just a little too obvious. Jacob chuckled when I explained. "You want them to steal it?" I nodded. "Not steal. Prove themselves." Carter was less amused. "You're baiting them into a crime. Once they take that will, it's evidence of intent. But you'd better be ready for their next move." "I've been ready for 40 years, I replied. We rigged the study with discrete cameras. One above the bookshelf, another hidden in the clock on the mantelpiece. Each trained on the desk and safe. "Once they touch that paper," Carter said, "there's no coming back." "Exactly," I told him. "That's the point." The bait was set. All that remained was to draw them in. So I extended an invitation. Not at Bella Vista, not at my penthouse, but at Catherine's old townhouse in Brooklyn Heights. It was a place filled with memories, a home untouched by the poison of recent years. Daniel had loved it as a boy, and Elena had always admired its antique charm. When I called, Elena's voice brightened instantly. "That sounds wonderful, Irving. Intimate, family. We'd love to." Of course they would. I arranged every detail carefully. Candles lit, Catherine's china on the table, wine uncorked. I even wore the old watch I'd bought to celebrate our first million, the one I'd never worn until now. If they wanted to kill the past, I would let them do it, surrounded by the ghosts of everything they had destroyed. They arrived late, Elena in pearls and Daniel in another immaculate suit. "Dad," Daniel said warmly, embracing me. His cologne was too strong, masking the scent of nerves. Alina kissed my cheek with lips cold as ice. Everything looks beautiful, she said, scanning the room. Her eyes lingered on the mantel, on Catherine's portrait, on the faint outline of the study door. She was already casing the house. We ate slowly, the conversation stiff but polite. Daniel asked about my travel plans again. Alina steered the talk toward estate planning, legacy, family trusts. I gave vague answers, smiling, sipping my wine, watching them unravel. At one point, Alina leaned closer, lowering her voice. Irving, you've built something extraordinary. You deserve to know it will stay safe in the right hands. I met her gaze evenly. The right hands always reveal themselves. Her smile tightened. She understood the barb. After dessert, I excused myself, leaving them in the dining room. I made a show of going upstairs, letting the boards creak under my steps. In reality, I circled back through the service hallway and into the shadows of the study. The safe key sat in the desk drawer, exactly where I'd left it. Within minutes, I heard footsteps. Soft, careful, hesitant Elena's whisper. Go on, he left it here. Daniel's voice, trembling. I don't like this. Do you like being poor? She snapped. A pause. Then the drawer slid open. Metal clinked. The key turned in the lock. The safe door swung wide. I held my breath as Daniel pulled out the envelope. My counterfeit will. His hands shook. Alina snatched it, her eyes devouring the pages. This is it, she whispered. We're secure. Once he's gone, everything is ours. The cameras caught every word. I waited until the papers slid into her purse before stepping from the shadows. Secure, are you? I asked softly. They froze. Elena's face drained of color. Daniel's jaw dropped. The envelope in her bag burned like a brand. Dad, I save it, I said coldly. You've saved me the trouble of guessing. They stammered, begged, scrambled for excuses. But the cameras had seen it all, and they knew it. Here's the reality, I said, my voice steady. I have everything I need to put you both behind bars. Theft, attempted fraud, conspiracy. Combined with the toxicology report, it's enough to bury you. Daniel's eyes filled with tears. Alina remained rigid, her jaw clenched, her pride refusing to break. So why not? Alina hissed. Why not hand us over now? End it. Because prison is mercy, I said, and mercy is wasted on you. Their confusion deepened. I leaned closer, lowering my voice to a blade. You wanted $57 million. You'll inherit nothing, not a dime. Every cent will go to medical research in Catherine's name. You wanted me dead. Instead, I'll live long enough to watch you crumble under the weight of your own greed. That is your sentence. Elena's eyes blazed. You can't, I already did. I cut her off. I turned my back on them, walking toward the front door. Behind me, Daniel broke down, sobbing into his hands. Alina hissed furiously at him, her words sharp as knives. They would devour each other now. I didn't need to lift another finger. At the threshold, I looked back one last time. Enjoy your evening. It's the last you'll ever share in this house. Then I closed the door. The rain had stopped outside, leaving the air cool, sharp, clean. I breathed deeply, the first true breath of freedom I'd taken in years. The trap was sprung, the prey was caged. And now, all that remained was the final reckoning. The trap was set, the evidence secure, and my decision final. But it wasn't enough to strip Daniel and Alina in the shadows. No, they had woven their schemes in whispers and private corners. Their downfall needed to be public. The world that had seen them as a golden couple needed to see the truth. And there was only one place where it could happen: Bella Vista. When I announced to the staff that I would be hosting one last dinner at Bella Vista, the news spread like wildfire. Old investors, former colleagues, society friends, they all wanted a seat at the table. They smelled drama, though none could have imagined the feast I'd prepared. Alina was the first to call. Her voice was syrup, sticky and sweet. How wonderful. Irving, a celebration? Yes. Daniel and I are thrilled to join. Thrilled, of course. She believed the decoy will tucked into her purse made her untouchable. She had no idea it was the very rope she'd hang herself with. The night arrived, heavy with summer air. Bella Vista glowed with chandeliers, its halls echoing with laughter, glasses clinking. I walked through the crowd slowly, greeting old friends, letting their admiration wash over me. Still sharp as ever. Irving. One man chuckled, clapping my shoulder. Oh, sharper than you think, I replied with a smile. Daniel and Alina swept in late. As always, she wore emerald silk, dripping with borrowed diamonds. He followed, tense, but trying to mimic her confidence. They kissed cheeks, shook hands, whispered promises of success. No one knew they were walking into their own funeral. Dinner stretched across hours. We ate, drank, and traded old stories. But as the final course was cleared, I rose to my feet and tapped my glass. The room hushed, eyes turning to me. Friends, I began, my voice steady. Tonight is not just a dinner. It's a reckoning. I have spent a lifetime building, fighting, surviving, and I have discovered that the greatest threats do not come from strangers. but from those you love most. Murmurs spread, faces leaned in. Elena's smile faltered. Daniel's fork clattered against his plate. I continued. Some of you know my son, Daniel, and his wife, Elena. You've admired them, perhaps envied them, but you deserve to know the truth. I nodded toward the far wall. Carter, hidden in the wings, flicked a switch. The chandelier dimmed, a screen descended, and the footage began to play. Gasps rippled through the hall as the video rolled. Daniel, trembling, opening the drawer. Elena snatching the will, her voice clear as glass. Once he's gone, everything is ours. The room fell silent except for her damning words echoing across marble and crystal. Daniel's face drained white. Elena shot to her feet. This is outrageous. Fabricated. He's staging this. But the damage was done. Friends they had courted. Investors they had flattered. All now stared at them with horror, disgust, betrayal. I raised my voice above the murmurs. You wanted to poison me for $57 million. You thought you could steal not only my life, but Catherine's legacy. Instead, you inherit nothing. Every cent will go to charity in her name. You will walk out of here with no fortune, no reputation, and no place in my home or heart. Daniel's lip trembled, tears streaking down his face. Dad, please, I didn't. You chose your path, I said coldly. Elena grabbed his arm, her mask cracking into fury. Get up, don't beg him. We'll survive without him. But no one in that room would touch them now. Doors would slam shut, deals would vanish, friendships would rot. In a single evening, they had become pariahs. They stumbled toward the exit, faces burning under the weight of 100 eyes. Elena's heels clicked like gunshots across the marble. Daniel didn't look up, his shame a cloak he could not remove. The doors closed behind them. Silence hung heavy. Finally, I lifted my glass. To Catherine, may her memory outlast greed. The room erupted in applause. Not for me, but for her. For the woman who had given me everything worth protecting. That night, I walked the gardens of Bella Vista alone, moonlight spilling across the fountains. The house was quiet again, at peace. Daniel and Elena were gone, stripped of power, left to choke on the ashes of their own ambition. And me, I was lighter than I had been in decades. The war was over. The empire was safe. Catherine's legacy would endure. Justice had been served, not with blood, but with truth. And that, I realized, was the sharpest revenge of all. When the echoes of applause faded that night at Bella Vista, I felt something I hadn't in years. Peace, not triumph, not gloating, not even satisfaction, just stillness. The war was over, but endings, I've learned, are never as clean as we imagine. What happens after the storm often matters just as much as the storm itself. The morning after, newspapers lit up with whispers. Billionaire heir, exposed in family scandal. Poison plot rocks, New York high society. Reporters scrambled for quotes. But I stayed silent. The footage spoke louder than I ever could. Daniel and Elena vanished from the headlines within weeks, replaced by fresher scandals. But for those who had seen the truth with their own eyes, the memory lingered. The golden couple had become untouchable. And not in the way they once dreamed. Carter kept tabs for me, though I never asked him to. He was loyal that way. Daniel tried to find work again. Small consulting roles, startup ventures, but every door slammed shut. Too much baggage, one investor whispered. Can't trust him, said another. Without money, without reputation. He spiraled. He sold his watches, his cars, even the apartment Elena once bragged about. Each sale chipped away at his pride. One afternoon, Carter mentioned spotting him outside a bar downtown, hair disheveled, jacket torn, muttering to himself. My heart clenched, not with pity, but with the ache of knowing how far he'd fallen. Elena lasted longer. She always did. Cold, calculating, she tried clawing her way back into the circles she once ruled. But the scandal followed her like perfume. The same people who once toasted her now whispered behind fans and closed doors. Eventually, she left Daniel, abandoned him in a tiny rented apartment, took what little remained, and disappeared overseas. Rumor placed her in Monaco, clinging to older men with deeper pockets. But her eyes, even in photographs, told the truth. She was a queen without a kingdom, forever exiled by her own greed. For me, life did not end at Bella Vista. It began again. I poured the entirety of my fortune into a foundation under Catherine's name. Research for cancer treatments, scholarships for young doctors, grants for hospitals in struggling towns. Her legacy became a lighthouse, guiding lives I would never meet. The letters began arriving within months. Families thanking me for funding treatments. Students writing about how Catherine's scholarship kept their dreams alive. Each letter was a bomb, proof that I had chosen right. Catherine would have been proud. That was all I needed. Bella Vista itself transformed. No longer a fortress against betrayal, it became alive again. I reopened the gardens for charity galas, turned the library into a research archive, and welcomed young medical students to study in Catherine's name. Where once the walls had been heavy with suspicion, now they rang with laughter, curiosity, and hope. The ghosts no longer haunted me. They guided me. And yet, there were nights when the silence pressed hard. Because beneath all the justice, all the revenge, one truth remained. Daniel was still my son, my blood, the boy who once sat on my shoulders at the zoo, who once laughed until milk spilled out of his nose at the breakfast table. That boy was gone, but he had lived, and I had loved him. Nothing could erase that. Sometimes I'd catch myself staring at the old family photographs. Catherine's smile, Daniel's small hand in mine. My chest would tighten, and I'd whisper into the dark, "Where did you go, son? Where did I lose you?" No answer ever came. Years passed. My hair whitened, my steps slowed, but my resolve never faltered. Daniel never returned. Elena never resurfaced. They were ghosts now, banished by their own choices. And I had become something else. Not just a man who survived betrayal, but a man who turned pain into purpose. One evening, as the sun set over Bella Vista, I stood in the gardens, watching the light catch on Catherine's bronze memorial. Birds sang in the trees. Students wandered the paths, books in hand. I realized then that revenge, in its truest form, is not destruction. It is creation. It is proving that betrayal cannot kill you. It can only sharpen you, carve you into something stronger. And in that moment, I understood. I had already won. And how my own son's greed for $57 million ended up costing him everything. Betrayal never comes easy. But sometimes, justice is the only answer. Now I want to hear from you. What would you have done in my place? Would you have forgiven your son, or cut him out of your life forever? Tell me in the comments, because I read every single one. If you were hooked by this story, make sure to smash that like button. Subscribe if you haven't already, and share this video with a friend who loves shocking family dramas. Until next time, stay sharp, stay safe, and never underestimate the price of betrayal. *.